Welcome to the Native American Archive section's 20 Years of NAAS interview series. This series features conversations with past section chairs, reflecting on their leadership and experiences. The Native American Archive section began in 2005 when archivists at the SAA annual meeting in New Orleans petitioned to form what was first called the Native American Archives Roundtable. On August 13, 2005, the SAA Council unanimously approved its creation, and David L. George Shango Jr. became the first chair, helping launch a space dedicated to strengthening tribal archives and centering Indigenous voices in the archival profession. Over the years, the Roundtable grew in size and influence, eventually becoming the Native American Archive section, continuing its commitment to advocacy, education, and community. Through these interviews, we honor that history and explore the stories of those who have guided us along the way. Hello, and welcome to the 20 Years of NAAS interview series. My name is Jack Schmidt, NAAS Secretary, and it's my pleasure to welcome and introduce Ricky Punzalan, a scholar and educator whose work has significantly shaped critical archival theory, community-centered practice, and reparative approaches to archives and museums. Ricky holds a PhD in information from the University of Michigan, along with graduate certificates in science, technology, and society, and museum studies, and earned his library and archival degrees from the University of the Philippines, Diliman. Ricky is taught at both the University of the Philippines and the University of Maryland, and his professional work includes establishing the archives of a former leprosarium and curating a centennial museum exhibition in the Philippines. He served on the Society of American Archivists Council from 2018 to 2021, and again in 2025 to 2026. He has served as chair as the Native American Archive section from 2017 to 18, and co-chair of SAA's Archival Repatriation Committee from 2022 to 2025. He is currently the director of the University of Michigan's Museum Studies program and sits on the board of trustees of the Library of Congress American Folklife Center. Welcome, Ricky.
Great to be here. Thank you for that nice introduction.
Of course. Wonderful to see you. Now, you've described your work as being both rooted in this critical theory and deeply relational practice. One of the first things we try to do in our interviews is look back on the career and look back at your journey in archives and archival studies. So, with that in mind, what early experiences would you say shaped your commitment to social justice and to community-centered archival work?
That's a good question. I started my career as an archivist in the Philippines, learning archival ideas and theory. And also, I had more of a kind of liberal arts education, and I read a whole bunch of, critical theory and more than I wanted at that time in my life as a young person. But why did I focus on relationality and also critical theory? The thing is, you once you start reading critical ideas around, that explains why society is the society that it is, and why our histories are deeply problematic, and why we privilege certain knowledge systems, certain gender identities and expressions, and uh, you know and then you can go down the list of like explanation of why society is the way it is. And then you realize that, oh yeah, like it's actually a good explanation to why things are, including, like theories around why archives work the way they work. So, like it's really, intellectually illuminating, and also exciting to hear those things, especially like in the classroom and when you're conversing with people. Um, and but what I realized though is that it's one thing to explain the world, in a more of a rhetorical sense, than actually doing the things that you're learning and being guided by them in your day-to-day life. So I was, I've seen people who are deeply, in terms of talk, really quite poised around, like relationships in terms of power and
Hmm.
class and gender. But in their personal lives, they're actually awful people. And their relationship with communities
Hmm.
are just talk. They can't point to a particular group or community or individuals that they form relationships with. So I said, these things are meaningless. Without like real markers of relationship and relationality. So I say this because again I'll go back to my more of a quote unquote classical archival training where I learned Western ideas of archives, and I started actually implementing them in practice in the Philippines, and how I saw over and over how it was failing. It was
Hmm.
failing because number one, it's Western. It's those are ideas built in, um, you know, contexts where things are available. Right?
Hmm.
Like for instance, Hollinger boxes are available, and in places like the Philippines, it's really expensive, and to expect communities to be able to afford a Hollinger box is
Hmm.
unreasonable. But yet, the standards is that you put things in an archival box,
Right.
and things like that. So to me, as basically um, making people feel bad because they're not following archival standards built for Western. That's how I began my career, looking at like how do I hack this system? How do I uh, make sure that we transform archival work that responds to specific community contexts. And if they
Hmm.
don't follow certain professional standards and intellectual markers of archival work, that they are not made to feel bad. Uh,
Hmm.
because at the end of the day, I think archival work should be context specific and based on the specific requirements and needs and cultural protocols of uh, the communities trying to build those archival infrastructures and collections. So yeah, so relationality is very important to me because you only get to that understanding of cultural protocols and what makes sense in
Hmm.
context by forming relationships and talking to people and
Right.
understanding how to negotiate practice and ideas with
Hmm.
what matters to communities.
Right. So touching on that, the building relationships between the institution and the community and that central aspect there. You've touched a lot on how, trust is an integral element of that, both in your writing and in your leadership through NAS and in other roles. So from that perspective, what would you say it actually takes for archival institutions to build or rebuild trust with Indigenous and other marginalized communities, especially when there's, instances of historical harm involved?
I think showing up means a lot. I mean,
Hmm.
at least my experience with Filipino communities, because we do have indigenous collections in North America
Hmm.
pertaining to the Philippines, and also so there's Filipinos in the diaspora, Filipinos in the Philippines, and there's Filipinos in Ann Arbor, Michigan, for instance.
Hmm.
It matters when you show up, like and then of course it will where you show up will also matter. Of course it will be different in every community, like for instance in Filipino communities, showing up in potlucks, parties
Mm.
and events uh, is very important. But first, you need to get you need to be invited, and how do you get invited? And sometimes it only takes um, talking to people in the reading room and understanding where those spaces might be and opportunities and might be located and happening and being invited. So I tend to humanize this as not an kind of a rocket science, kind of like, I can't figure it out. Where do I start? Like,
Mhm.
you start by
Mhm.
talking to people, and you start by being welcoming and open. I don't think community researchers will be open to inviting you to their potluck or events if you're not friendly in the reading room. What makes you expect that you'll be
Uh-huh.
invited to a party if you're not friendly, you know? So,
Mhm.
that's the
Mhm.
basic thing, right? And so I'll use, I'd like to use Filipino examples because, I'm Filipino. And so yeah, for us, being welcoming and generous, is very important. And um, I often get asked, like, we don't know the community, where do we go? Like, there are actually, believe it or not, people doing research right now from the community and form those relationships in the reading room, and or invite communities into your institution and host a potluck there, if whatever that event that that brings people and communities together. And so showing up, generosity, those
Mhm.
are, unfortunately, sometimes, we don't teach those in a typical archival classroom, but those things are important. Now, the question is whether this is considered part of your work in
Mhm.
archives, because, most of the time, staff are discouraged from doing non-professional work,
Mhm. Mhm.
and you have to focus on the job that's been assigned to you, whether it's processing or reference work and things like that. Like, going to a potluck on a weekend, that's your own time. You're not, that's not part of your professional development. Maybe we could, like, shift how we frame these things, and perhaps acknowledge people who do this work, this relationship building work, and make it part of our professional responsibility or ethos. So, for instance, our colleagues in librarianship are beginning to recognize the social work dimension of library work, right? And something like that. So in archives, maybe we could start rethinking those things, and I know some institutions are.
Mhm.
So, like, yeah, it begins with, those small acts of relationship building, um, in the reading room, in our daily interaction with folks. Also, like, reaching out and then showing up, and we have a lot of, I think, you know uh, previous decades. I think people were writing um, case studies on um, acquisition and donor relations, and
Mhm. Mhm.
those that literature, but it tends to be framed in terms of, like, then this is how you get collections.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's an element of that, but I think the focus should be more like, how do we represent collections better,
Mhm.
and by understanding the cultures represented in the collection. Because I think we have enough stuff or materials in the archives. It's
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
use and activation and seeing yourself represented in those collections that's actually, I think, missing. So don't go with an idea that this is, a collection development effort.
Right. Right. It's not there as so much as a way to further build up your collection in terms of acquiring material, but to strengthen the relationships between the institutions and the communities that are represented within their holding.
Yeah, and also, like, figuring out what are the actual uses of our materials
Yeah.
in the community. That's not always necessarily scholarly use,
Mhm.
or that ends up being written as an article or a book.
Right.
Yeah.
How can we in the materials in our collection support the community in other ways rather than
Yeah.
it being kind of yeah, because I something that struck to me while you were just touching on that point was how there's frequently or there's historically been a lot more focus on kind of extractive relationships rather
Mhm.
than more mutually beneficial ones in that way. And so I wanted to ask, uh, I guess, other concrete signs that you've seen where an archival relationship between an institution and a community has moved from this kind of more extractive relationship to a reciprocal relationship. And I'm assuming that it looks a lot like how you've described with these potlucks or other, types of community events, but just opportunities for relationship building in that way. Would that be right?
Hmm. Yeah, there's those social events, but there's also like, visible shifts in the way
Mhm.
you do your professional work in the institution, in the
Mhm.
repository. So either being open to maybe, and this doesn't happen every time, but open to
Mhm.
returning things that actually don't belong to you back to communities, like actual repatriation
Mhm.
work. And I would say that's more of an extreme case most of the time, at least in my experience, for Philippine collections and some, Native American collections that I've seen as cases.
Mhm.
It's communities don't want the materials back; they want copies. That's what they want, being able to provide those copies. So that's a different type of return, maybe knowledge sharing
Mhm. Mhm.
um, projects, changing your description. Like we're seeing the rise of reparative description work. That's another one.
Mhm. Mhm.
Changing your reading room layout into a more that doesn't look like prison, but actually, welcoming, and people can don't feel like they're being constantly monitored and watched.
Mhm.
Um, uh, you know, so it could be those tangible things. Some institutions, more and more institutions are removing um, paintings and photographs of only white men. Uh, because it's really quite um, discouraging when you enter a neoclassical building, and then paintings of dead white men hanging on the walls, and then you are into this kind of panopticon configured space, and
Mhm.
archivists breathing down your neck. Well, there are tangible things you can do, like maybe remove those paintings and have more diverse images displayed in your reading room. Like you don't need millions of dollars to you know do those things. So there are those tangible
Mhm.
uh,
Mhm.
things that I think I'm seeing being done. There's a pivot in archival field on looking at radical empathy
Mhm.
and what it
Mhm.
actually means. If it's unfamiliar to you,
Mhm.
I suggest like just Google radical empathy archives and librarianship. There's a lot of articles written by folks on that. So that's like the whole idea of affect and
Mhm.
how we relate to people and talk to people, and uh, also acknowledging that there's a lot of secondary trauma in archival work, that checking in on people who are actually doing the labor of archives,
Right.
those things. So like I think I gave you a range of like from more of a interpersonal demeanor kind
Mhm.
of interaction to
Yeah.
completely changing the layout of your reading room.
Yeah. From interpersonal relationships to really the built environment and atmosphere of the overall experience of, like trying to conduct work within an archive or access those
Mhm.
materials.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
many institutions are actually for sure doing this already.
Mhm. Mhm. Um, well, shifting gears just a little here, I do want to make sure that we touch on PNAM and PINAR and professional advocacy in this way.
Mhm.
So you've been involved with both PNAM's advocacy and the development of PINAR. So I guess I should spell that out, Principles, Indigenous Archival Repatriation. Um, from your perspective, how do you view those two frameworks, like in how they differ, what they ask of archivists, and also where they complement each other?
Mhm. They're highly complementary. And
Hmm.
you know, Jack, you were in the room when we drafted PINAR
Hmm.
or PINAR.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and what was present in our imagination at that time when we were meeting is like we are not going to write a long document that
Hmm.
contradicts PNAM. In fact, we should be guided by PNAM. So those two uh, protocols, when you read them, they're not contradictory. They express each other in like symmetrical ways,
Hmm.
um, and that you know you are not going to pick and choose between the two. And
Right.
in fact, they're complementary. So it also in terms of age, you know, PNAM was written way ahead of PNAR, but you know the whole essence around relationality, we begin with that, like relationship will building, yeah, and uh determining like the different forms of arrangements that's possible, from shared stewardship to actual repatriation, to knowledge sharing, and clarifying the difference between the three, but still options depending on communities. Those are all complementary ideas. What PNAM, for me personally, introduced was this notion or concept of, cultural privacy and cultural sensitivity, that communities are, indigenous communities are, have the sovereign right to determine what knowledge gets to be shared with the public. And
Hmm.
with that, I think what PINAR is doing is to say, so not entitled to every knowledge in the world, and sometimes
Hmm.
those things
Hmm.
should be privileged to communities and therefore should be returned, and or at least handled with respect through
Hmm.
community consultation in your institution. So so there's um they are complementary. So
Hmm.
how they differ is like PINAR is more specific to ethical returns,
Hmm.
uh and also like giving more emphasis on the conversation around repatriation, and which also aligns with, at that time, there was like a reconsideration of um, the law, which I'm blanking on now.
Uh, NACRA?
NAGPRA,
Yes.
sorry.
No, that's all right.
Like
Hmm.
it's being mentioned over and over, and I forget it. Yeah, NAGPRA. And so, like
Hmm.
what's the role of records, and
Hmm.
clarifying that actually records are objects of repatriation in their own right, and also helpful sources in facilitating repatriation, and that we need the community voice in this conversation around return.
Hmm. Yeah, and I guess something I was hoping to address as well, not only the how the two frameworks complement or differ from each other was, I mean, I'm well aware that it took a significant amount of advocacy for PNAM to be adopted by SAA.
Mhm.
And touching as well just on your experience as chair of NAAS, uh, I wanted to think about or discuss with you a little what you've come to understand differently about the role of professional sections like NAAS within a larger institution such as SAA, given that experience that you had then, and then some of your additional experience within SAA now, because you've had a fairly unique experience touching on not only the section, but within council, within your co-chairship of the Archival Repatriation Committee. So you've had a number of different insights in what that tends to look like.
Is that your way of saying I'm getting old?
No, Ricky.
Just kidding. No, I will
Mhm.
say,
Mhm.
when I started in SAA, I joined in 2007.
Mhm.
It was a professional organization, right? And then
Mhm.
I did cycle through different sections and got engaged, in whatever advocacy or focus of a particular section. But only it's with NAAS when I became like active participant from a mere member watching in the
Hmm.
audience into being in the steering committee and then being chair, that I realized that there are areas of professional practice that's not being represented and touched by SAA as an organization. There are many community-based archival work being done by um, community members who either were either self-appointed or appointed by the community to
Hmm.
be in charge of those, to be memory keepers, right? And who are, I think, archivists in their own right, but never really considered as such by a traditional organization, professional organization like SAA, by
Hmm.
virtue of that they didn't get, let's say, a degree in an MLIS or an archives degree or history degree or you name it,
Hmm.
or perhaps not working in a Western archival repository or or so like those kinds. So I got more
Hmm.
exposure on that front, like knowing the amazing work that people do
Hmm.
uh most of the time outside the purview and knowledge of professional archivists, but they get things done. They get archives preserved in their respective communities. So that's I think the main difference that I
Hmm.
picked up, and I kind of also I think I'm also been primed to relax on my ideas around what's a professional archivist, who belongs in this organization and not, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
When I was on council,
Hmm.
that's the time when so post my uh, chair of NAS, there was a proposal by NAS to, provide scholarship for um, indigenous participants, to complimentary registration in attendance to our annual meeting. And, I'm, of course, very supportive, not only because, you know, it's a good diversifying project, quote unquote, but I do think that there are people who can't afford to go to SAA in the annual meeting, but are colleagues in many
Hmm.
respects. So yeah, um, what's the other part of your question? I'm trying to.
Oh, I guess I was thinking about uh well, actually, we're slowly wrapping down on time here, so I'll transition to one more question.
Sure.
I'll also make sure that there's not any other questions that we're waiting for in the chat. But yeah, I've got a last two to focus on that are really just on looking forward. So with all of this in mind, and the perspectives that you've brought across your career in here at NAS, I wanted to ask you what advice you might offer to current and future leaders of NAS who are navigating a lot of the same instances of advocacy or institutional resistance and community accountability. Um, and then second question right after that will be, what's giving you hope right now? Uh,
Yeah. So
mhm.
I would say, we should thank PNAAM and the years of denial to endorse it by SAA, that
Mhm.
and unrelenting advocacy by NAS and individuals, uh, that SAA has become an organization that now will listen to
Mhm.
to these frameworks and ideas, alternative forms of looking at uh, membership in the organization, what it means to be an archivist, the relationship of the professional uh, organization and archival, traditional archival, Western archival repository and community-based practice. Like it kind of fundamentally reshaped those thinking. Um, I was actually saying before that I feel like the greatest thing that SAA did to PNAM is to not endorse it in the beginning because
Mm,
it gave us this sustained advocacy that they then shifted the
mm,
way SAA thought about these things. Because you might remember that when SAA finally endorsed PNAM, it came with an apology and recognition of the racism that occurred when it was first denied. So how do you get an organization like that to issue an apology? It's this unrelenting advocacy work. So I guess I'm saying is
mhm,
don't give up on those issues. And it doesn't help when you walk away from SAA either. Over the years, I've seen people who's like, "Oh, I'm not seeing SAA do what it wants it to do." And well, you will guarantee that it doesn't do that if you leave. In fact, if you feel strongly about the cause and
mhm,
shifting the conversation, not just the conversation, but also the way we do things in the profession, then maybe run for council, institute the change that you want to see. Don't shout from the outside. Uh, Although some people will push back and say, sometimes when you come in and wanting to change the institution, but it's actually the institution that changes you.
mhm,
Well, now you know that, then don't change. Resist it and change the institution.
mhm,
I like yeah, doing this. Also, if you think this is not for you, maybe step aside and allow others to do it and support them. But
mhm, mhm,
so there's many ways that we can do this work. But what I like to remind people is that you can get a lot things done by actually just talking to people and treating people as people and understanding
mhm,
uh, you know and convincing them. In my own work here at the University of Michigan, I am in several committees, and sometimes I have ideas that I want done, and at the first meeting I hear a no, and then I raise it again in the second meeting, like I convince one or two people, and then I see like in a span of 3 months, people shift and change and say, now we get your point and understand. It's that unrelenting spirit and also not losing belief in people. But because no matter how much we differ in our field, I don't think your colleague across the table is the real enemy. And I always remind myself of that. There are real enemies. And I don't think that, when somebody needs to be convinced and shown your perspective, I don't cast them as enemy, but more of like, oh, here's a person that probably hasn't seen or different having a different life experience or worldview. Let
mhm,
me, slowly explain. And it takes time to convince people, and it takes time to make people realize that they're making a mistake. And most often than not, they don't even admit that they made a mistake, but they will make changes, right? But not
mhm,
articulate
mhm,
the mistake and acknowledge it. And to me, I take those things and say, okay, so I am more of an incrementalist as a person, and I'm more of a
mhm,
kind of like let me talk to people and let me volunteer. I want this to happen. Let me volunteer and do it. But once
mhm,
you're in that position, you really have to do it. It can't be you show up and not ready, or or you're only doing it because you like the position but not the work. So and
mhm,
sometimes
mhm.
I do think that that reflection is necessary. The last question, what gives me hope?
Yeah. What is giving you the most hope right now? What should we be paying attention to as we're looking, forward towards the future of Indigenous and critical archival practice?
I'm really hopeful, like, with the unlike PNAAM, the passage of the principles in archival repatriation was swift and quick.
Yes.
I'm very hopeful. Definitely, SAA is different. And as an organization, I see more and more, I think, investment within repositories to develop those relationships.
Hmm.
And again, this is not going to happen overnight, but it's happening in some institutions. And also the realization that uh, there are community-based organizations out there doing archival work, amazing archival work, and there's progress and movement around that. And I'm seeing more and more institutions being open to those kinds of partnerships and relationships. Um, the young people, because I teach introduction to archives, and I'm in a university. I see more and more students gravitating towards our field because they really are invested in the idea of historical accountability, social justice, making a difference around communities.
Well, as one of those former students, I want to say thank you again. And thank you to everyone that has joined us here today for this interview. We'll see you again next month. Thanks all.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ricky.
Thank you.